Right, thanks for coming. I'm going to just give you a rough idea of a day in the life of what it's like to be in the solutions engineering team at Nutanix. Table of contents is really complicated. It's what it is, and then any questions. I'm basically going to run through what we do day to day, stuff like that. If you've got any questions as we go along, please don't wait to the end, because you'll probably likely to forget. I've got to shoot off to go and take the kids to football and stuff like that. So if you want to interrupt, feel free. Just put your hand up and I'll do my best to see. Right, so that's a really old picture of me, which makes me look a lot younger. My name's Dave Brett. I'm based here in the UK, in a little village called Liphook, which is like an hour south of here in the country. I'm a senior solutions architect at Nutanix. I work in the performance engineering team, and I'm aligned to end user computing, but as you'll find out, there's a lot more to solutions engineering than just EUC. Before working at Nutanix, I worked for a Citrix customer, looking after their global Citrix deployment for many years. I was a Citrix technology professional up till about a month ago, till they decided to stop the program. Worked with all things EUC for a number of years. I'm a wannabe code monkey, do like to try and write code, and I'm an ultramarathon runner. If you've got any questions about any of that, feel free to ask. So, what is performance and solutions engineering R&D? It's quite a hefty title. So, within Nutanix, our charter, or what we're asked to do, is what you see up here. So evangelising our products. So we work with the channel enablement team and our field teams to create content, create presentations like we're doing now, on what we develop within Nutanix. And that's not just end user computing, that's everything to do with databases, flow, network security, some of the more kind of integrated products like NDB, which is Nutanix database services, bits and bobs like that. And we also support the certification program. So at Nutanix, just as you have at Citrix or VMware or Omnis or any of these other vendors, there's programs where people can become certified. We have the equivalent with MPXs in Nutanix, and we support them in, it's called, grilling is the only word I can think, where like a panel interview where people go in and we would support them in the questions that they ask and how they're delivered. That's about 40% of our time. 30% of our time is reducing sales friction, and this is supporting our SEs in the field. They get asked questions all the time from a wealth of different customers in different verticals. We kind of need to know how our products fit into all of those verticals and how we can help with the sales teams effectively deliver a better service to the customers. We do provide support for complex proof of concepts. So the SEs generally, they'll go in and they'll put a POC in, talking in my little space at the minute with EUC. If it's a very simple deployment, they'll go in and put that in. If it's a huge global enterprise that want a fairly complicated proof of concept, they'll come to our team and ask for some assistance in how they would set that up. That's about 30% of our time. Sizing guidance I'll get to in a minute. We do a load of testing on performance to prove that the products that we develop, or the engineers develop, do what we say we can do. And then approving our products. So this is around application performance and development. So we are actively involved with the engineering teams at Nutanix. Like if we're out in the field and we see something that, I don't want to say doesn't work right, that could be done better, then we'll feed that back to engineering, good and bad. If we see something that's brilliant, we'll tell them. If we see something that could be improved on, we'll tell them as well. And creates this feedback loop, which then they will go and resolve, and it will end up into the product. So the solutions engineering team as a whole, I realise I'm at the EUC forum, which is very much that bit, but what we look after as a whole. So SAP, I called it SAP HANA and got told off. It's SAP HANA apparently. We do look at that and enterprise resource planning around that, so we load test that and make sure that works on the platform. EUC and everything that involves, so Citrix, Parallels, Omnissa, everything else around end-user computing and how that works on top of Nutanix. Databases, so SQL, MySQL, Postgres, healthcare. So my team, there's 5 of us, and we have a resource that looks after healthcare within that, within my manager's remit. And they look at Epic and all of the integrations and performance about how Epic would perform on our platform. Automation, this is a big one, and this kind of covers all of them. So this one and this one, well, these 3, so cloud native, hybrid cloud and automation are part of our organisational structure, and they tie into all of the other 4. So EUC, we rely on automation a lot, as well as customers in the field. So the Ansible and the Packer and all the Terraform modules that we produce, we provide feedback into how that works with end-user computing. The hybrid cloud is more around scale limits and architecture. So we talk about linear scale all the time with Nutanix, like you buy 1 node, you get X amount of nodes, and as you increase, it will increase linearly. The hybrid cloud team proved that at scale, so they're testing 100 node clusters with 12,000 desktops on, making sure that it does what it says it does. Then cloud native is all around AI and LLMs, as well as Kubernetes and containers. They look at all of that running on the platform. We are a global organisation. We don't all reside in one place. There are 8 managers and 35 full-time employees across the entire solutions engineering division at Nutanix. Within my team, there's people you all probably heard of. So there's myself, James Kindon, he's down here in Australia. Sven Heisman and Case Baggerman, they're here in Europe, and Jarian Gibson is over in Kansas. And that makes up the end-user computing team at Nutanix, which has its advantages being globally dispersed. And one of that is with testing. So we do a lot of testing, and the problem is they take ages to run. But because of where we all are, we can hand off to other people within the team. So I can start a test here at 3 p.m. UK time, and then Kindo can pick it up when he wakes up in the morning, start another one, hand it over to Jarian, and then it just keeps going back. So it has its benefits, gives you a bit more time for running because you get all the work done. The playground or the lab. So we have, as you'd imagine, a lot of kit to test it on. Gone are the days where I test all this on my little E1000 node in the garage. So we've got 175 nodes split across 4 data centers. There's 2 in the US, in Phoenix and Durham, 2 in Europe, in Amsterdam and Waldorf. We've got 100, well, it says there, we've got 14,080 cores to play with and 173 terabytes of RAM. So it does enable us to test at scale. In the EUC world, it also enables us to test products at scale. So right now we're doing some testing with FS Logics and Cloud Cache at scale on this kit. And this is just a quick one on numbers. So these are the 3, they're called OKRs within Nutanix, but these are our kind of charters that we adhere to. So the top on business impact, we had 1,024, which is odd considering we're all in IT, customer interactions this year, of which 114 were escalations that we actively get involved in across our organisation. So that isn't just EUC, that's databases, AI, hybrid cloud, but the entire organisation, that's how we assist the business. Customer value, we produced 414 artifacts that went out. They can be blog posts, presentations, documentation that goes up onto our solutions engineering portal, which is publicly available. And we put 770 features into the product stack across the entire stack. So that, again, might be things to do with EUC, it might be to do with flow network segmentation, which will assist EUC. So the collateral we do produce, there's 4 main like banners that they sit under, and all of these you can find if you just Google Nutanix documentation, log in, all of these will be there. All of the end user computing artifacts up there will be written by me or one of the other guys in the team, except for Case, because he makes us do it all. The reference architecture, so that's where we will performance test a product or a solution, and we'll provide proof that we can do what we say we can with that product. So we'll give you kind of a set of numbers or a set of nodes, node types, numbers of users, and we'll prove that, for example, CPM user profile locations, when you have multiple versions of that, it will work well with Nutanix files, and we'll give you the data to back that up. Tech notes are kind of, they're like reference architectures, but they're more focused on individual technology pieces, and we get a bit more free reign. So reference architecture is very structured in how we have to produce them. This is kind of a bit more like a blog post with performance data backing it up. So from a purely kind of nerd point of view, that's probably where you would go to read rather than that one. Best practice guide is what it says on the tin. So I'm in the middle of writing one about end user compute and high availability on Nutanix, and that will just give you best practices for how to deploy an EUC solution on our software and how to make it highly available. And then NVD is kind of it's like your shopping list for a Nutanix validated design. If you want it to do exactly what it says on the tin, go buy that, configure it that way, and it will do what it says. We have 2 of them as well. There is a lot more within the solutions engineering team, but there are 2 aligned to end user computing. These 3 things here. So I just mentioned earlier about the enabling the SEs to do a better job when they're in front of our customers. So we used to just produce these. And since James and I joined, we were like, well, what else can we do to help the teams rather than just give them a tech note and say, this is how you deploy CPM or profile management on Nutanix files? What can we do to give them a bit more value? So we started producing 3 other, well, there's actually 4 other documents that go along with the collateral. So this is all public facing. This is all just something that we do internally. So what we do is, for every document we produce, we create a slide deck that any of the SEs can take and put into a customer-facing deck, and it just high-level explains what we've done in the testing or the collateral we produced. We also do a video walkthrough explaining that slide deck to the SEs, because often we'll get a bit nerdy with stuff and it's difficult to explain to the SEs, so we'll walk through the slide deck and say, this is what this slide means, this is how you can explain it to the customers. And then we do a lessons learned document. So during our testing, we always uncover things that cause us issues or problems that we come across. We'll write that down and put that with the collateral on our internal page so that the SEs can say, yeah, deploy this. However, when we did that, these are some of the things you want to look out for, and it just gives a bit more value to the document rather than, here's a document, go follow that, and it will do what it says. This is an example of that internally. So this is, for example, the NVIDIA GPUs on HP is something that I tested recently. It's an RA. This is the PowerPoint presentation that anyone internally can click on. There's me in my monotone voice giving a walkthrough of those slides, and then a lessons learned doc, of which there are a few, which I'll get to in a minute. So, testing philosophy. So this is thing that we believe to be paramount at Nutanix to prove that we can actually do what we say we can do. So the what is power repetition. We'll never do any test once. We won't just run a test and assume that that's the right numbers. Everything we do more than once. So for example, if we're testing Windows 11 24H2, we'll set a test run going and say we're testing 1,500 desktops. We'll run a full login enterprise test on that, and we'll do that between 3 and 5 times, the same test. And then we'll use the median numbers. So we'll use the average of those tests to make sure we're getting an accurate result. And whilst we'd love to, we try not to put hero numbers in there. So sometimes we do get them, but we don't often publish them, because in reality, real life workloads are often a lot more resource intensive and you won't get them. The reason we do that, the middle number does cover the best and the worst of both scenarios. It does ensure that we get correct results, and we want to guide our customers and partners properly and not give them something that they're not going to be able to achieve. And this gathers, I'll get to this in a minute, but this is an example of one of the dashboards or the Grafana dashboard. There's a whole load of stuff under here, which you'll see in a minute, but it does enable us to gather a massive amount of information about, in this case, end user computing on our platform. Just conscious of time. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah. So, what we do when we get that information, normally as a team, so one of us will get assigned to do a certain piece of collateral. For example, I did, the GPU stuff. So I ran a load of tests on some Nutanix nodes with GPUs in. We got some different numbers around it, and then we'll go through that as a team. So we'll publish the documents, and then internally we'll talk about it. And then we'll speak to one of the PMs. So in this case, it's a guy called Joe. He's the GPU PM at Nutanix, and we'll feed back the information that we get, whether that's good or bad. And it genuinely isn't always good. We uncover a lot of problems, not only with our software, but other vendors that we partner with software. And we also feed back, like we feed back to Rody quite often. If we have an issue with some of the HDX things that we're seeing, we'll feed that back, and then Citrix will take that on board and then change something in their product which makes it work better for everyone else. So it is a very collaborative approach. We do interact with a lot of other partners, but the feedback is always there, and this is really important, because if we don't do this, nothing ever moves on. It kind of just sits there festering, and it's, you don't get any improvements in things. So I just want to give you an example of how that did work with the GPU side of things. So this is kind of how it worked in real life. This is what would happen internally at Nutanix in this feedback loop. So there would be an issue get identified. One second. In this case, it was a problem with the GPUs, or it wasn't an issue with the GPUs, it was something that we were seeing with stats at scale. And then we validate that. So we can't just go, oh, we've seen this once. Therefore, it's now an issue that engineering needs to put some effort into resolving. We will test that over and over again. We'll make sure that we've got we can reproduce the problem. It's repeatable. We know exactly where the problem sits within the product. Not to say we know how to fix it, but we know how to make it happen. Then we'll engage with engineering. And then there's a whole process that goes around that, which I'll get to. Effectively, after engineering have been involved, there'll hopefully be a fix that will come out, which we'll then validate, and then that will go into a release cycle. And this bit sounds really easy, but it's not in reality. If you think about, I'll get to it in a minute, but if you think about what's involved in just a patch release, especially if you look at something like Nutanix AHV, which is the hypervisor, we could patch something on there to fix a specific GPU issue for end user computing, but that could cause a whole load of other issues for other areas in the product stack. So this bit is actually really difficult to do. So in this case, this is what we saw. So during the production of the RA for GPUs, it was fine when we were doing it at a small scale. So we were powering on a bunch of machines. Whenever you deploy the Nutanix plugin right now for HV, there's a setting in there called maximum operations per minute, and by default it will install that. It will configure that to 10. One of the first things most people do, or should do, if you read the best practice guide, which I mentioned earlier, is go on, edit that hosting connection and switch that number to 50, which enables 50, it's effectively 50 API calls per minute to the Nutanix API from Citrix Studio. We did that, and then we loaded up, we had 2 A16 cards in a node, so we had 128 user VMs per node with a 1B profile assigned to each one. We had 8 nodes in the cluster, and we just switched them all on at one go to see what would happen. And what we saw was the workload was working fine, but what we could see from a Prism element, which is our management interface, we would see drop statistics. So the CPU would ramp up and then it would vanish. Memory would ramp up and then it would vanish. And then after an amount of time, it would then come back. The workloads itself were working, so the VSI test was going through all right, but we weren't getting accurate stats back because the API wasn't able to tell us what was happening. So that was the identifier. So that's what we found to be the problem. So then what happens internally is we log into Jira, which is really not fun to do, but we have to do it because that's what they use. So we log into Jira and we log a ticket and we put as much detail in there as possible because these guys, the engineers are engineers. They don't know about Citrix. They don't know about hosting. Like if you said we changed the hosting connection to blah, they wouldn't have a clue what you're doing. It's not going to help them resolve the issue that you've got. So we log a Jira ticket. We really try and detail out, like, this is what we did in Nutanix. We switched on 1,024 VMs all at the same time, and this happened. Normally, key stakeholders will also be involved. We use Slack internally for communication. So at this point, there's normally another Slack channel will be set up, which is what we all need in our life, with all the guys from solution engineering, all the engineers, the product PM, in this case the GPU PM, and some key stakeholders. Everyone's in Slack, typing away, it's going bananas. And then it boils out, they normally say to us, right, give us an environment to test this in. Because they do have the ability to test, but generally not on the same scale that we do, because that's what we do within the organisation. So then we'll go ahead, we'll build an environment for them, give them access, and then they'll reproduce the issue. And in this case, they were able to see the drop stats quite easily. It was very, very easy and quick to produce. They were messing around with some internal AHV stuff, which was changing, there's a cache, a GPU stack collection cache within AHV, Acropolis hypervisor. Sorry, I get told off for abbreviating all the time. That's our hypervisor. They upped the cache, and also there's some edits in the way that the GPUs were reporting, the NVIDIA drivers were reporting the statistics back to Acropolis hypervisor or hypervisor, which then in turn was displayed by the CVMs. So the engineering teams made a bunch of fixes on that. There were some changes in the NVIDIA drivers, the version drivers that we used, which we switched. We then tested that again, 1024, it's like literally VM.on star, make sure that nothing broke. And we tested that with Windows 10 and Windows 11 desktops, and the problem's resolved. And that's kind of what happens day to day within our roles. We then review the testing data. So this was with 1024. We see the CPU graph growing nicely. We try and test at 80% during steady state. So the two bits to the test here, generally, so we have a 48-minute window where we log in X number of users. So in this case, 1,024 users all logging on in 48 minutes. Then we have a 20-minute steady state, which is like day 2 runtime operations. Make sure we weren't seeing any drop stats. Go back to Slack, type loads, tell everyone it's working, they're all happy with it. Then the engineering teams speak to release management. And this is where things generally get tied up. So if there's a huge customer that this is like point blank stopping them working, sometimes there'll be like a private which will go out and then they can resolve that and they can test it internally. But to get that rolled up into a product, it has to go into release management, which gather all of the engineering data that's being done across the organization, which is hundreds of thousands of lines of code. Make sure that this is gone through the UAT cycles, make sure it's not breaking anything else. Then it goes into the Jira ticket and it ends up in the product. And that is kind of how it works over and over and over again. We'll find something, it will get flagged, the engineering will fix it, and then it goes into the product. And you can, it's quite cool when you sort of, from a personal point of view, where you find a bug in some of our software and you actually see it being fixed. You don't often see that, like certainly I never saw that from the customer side. and you switch to the vendor side, it's quite good seeing some things go in there. So another thing we do a lot of is benchmarking. So we test to make sure, again, like I said earlier, that we do what we say we can do. This is entirely automated. We don't do any of this manually because, well, basically we can't be trusted. Like, to be true, if you try and do these things manually, the way that I would build a VM is completely different to the way an Australian guy in Sydney would build a VM. And we need a way of a repeatable process that we can ensure our results are accurate. So we have a whole framework that we've built around testing. What it will do, it will stage the test, so it will set up all of the pools, and this isn't specific to Citrix, it's Omnissa, Citrix, Parallels, any of the brokers that we will support. We'll do all the provisioning automatically, build an image, optimize it, create the VMs, then we'll do the login enterprise test execution, which will run, like I said earlier, between 3 and 5 times. Test the workload, then it collects the data. So login enterprise does give you a lot of data. For us personally, it wasn't enough. It wasn't the amount of insights that we wanted into our product stack to make sure it's working right. So we use all of that data, and then we use our APIs to get more data, and we upload that into an InfluxDB, and then we front that with Grafana. I'm not going to walk through all of this, but this is effectively what we're gathering during a test run. So this, just this one block here, that's the login VSI data. We get data from the hosts, because I'm like a NetScaler geek. We also get all the NetScaler data if we're using load balancers, all the infrastructure stuff. We get a ton of stuff like metadata, and we pull all of that in and upload that in one go. These are them 2 stages earlier, and this is important because, like, this is what the user's going to experience generally. Like, there is a boot storm within organisations. Most people get to work at 9, or at least they used to. Now that everyone works at home, you sort of log on at whatever, 3 in the morning, and then you're done by 9. But this side here is how, when your platform is fully loaded, how it's performing. And this is the one that means the most. Getting onto your platform is important. Maybe not, it's not less important than it used to be, but this is like, everyone was always focused on like the login time and stuff like that. During the steady state we're seeing now is where, if there's a problem here, people shout a lot louder than if they can't get on in under 30 seconds. This is our dashboard. I did record a quick video, and there is time to go through it, so I will. When we upload the data, we give it a reference. So that one's the TechNote 2002, which is the Citrix Profile Management. You can see here, these are the tests that we run. So each test will give it like the number of nodes, the versions we're using, the number of users, VMs, and what the test was actually doing. So this one is continuous availability on. And then these are the 2 tests I've selected, and then here you can see each of these tests was run 3 times. So if I select run 2 on both, what that then gives us the ability to do is compare the metadata here for both test runs, so we can see all the versions of everything we ran. With the comment, and then here, this is where we can compare steady state performance. We can see all of our cluster resources, and the reason we developed this is the biggest thing with performance testing in our world is the impact of change. So, for example, if Citrix release the next LTSR version, we want to know how that will impact our customers running Citrix on Nutanix. Then we can test that, we can overlay it, we can see the difference between login time, and we can then inform our customers, listen, if you go from here to here, the likelihood is this is what you'll see from our testing, at least. I won't let the rest of this play out because well, there's no need. And what that gives us the ability to do is drive accuracy into the documents. So this is one of the test runs we did with session recording running on top of Nutanix files, and this is the data from the MSMQ queues on session recording, which, unless you've used it, probably doesn't mean a lot, but this was massively valuable to us and to the customers that were using this on top of what we do. And that's all very well for release products, like LTSR versions, but then what happens, our engineers are working quick. So we've got two main integration points for end user computing generally. It's AOS, which is Acropolis operating system, which is the management part, and then AHV, which is our hypervisor. And they're packaged separately. And the engineering teams release it, so they use a whole GitHub workflow and all of this stuff to produce these like new builds, and they do often more than one a day. So how do we keep up with them to make sure that we're picking up any errors early in the software development lifecycle, which in turn reduces the delays on releases? Because if we don't test the integration, then they're like, right, we've got a new version, it's ready to release, can you go test it? We then test it and say, yeah, but you've broken whatever, Parallels VM provisioning. And then they have to go through all this engineering effort to fix that. If we pick that up early, that reduces that friction. So we developed another framework which builds into our login VSI framework. So every night we download the latest engineering releases for AOS and HV, so the latest builds that they've put into the master branch on Git. We'll foundation and cluster with it automatically, so we'll build a Nutanix cluster. We'll then deploy a base image to the cluster and configure it. So we'll configure all the networking, all the images, we'll push the image down. We'll then prepare a snapshot on that VM, move over to the Login Enterprise framework, which will then build all the machines, do everything it needs to do, and then execute the test results, or execute the test, upload the results to Grafana, revert everything back to its default settings, and then send a daily Slack report to us. So we know every day whether there's an integration issue with the latest version of the code, and whether we're going to have any engineering effort to resolve that, which we do have one at the minute, which they're working on to fix on HV11. Which gives us these kind of results. So this is the test here between, it's Windows 10, 11, 22H2, 23 and 24. You can see the cluster CPU is largely similar. In our world, they wouldn't be similar. We really focus on like small things, which in the real world probably doesn't mean as much as we think it does, but we get quite weird about it all. What you can see though, which was interesting, is group policies on Windows 10 took a lot longer to apply than they do on Windows 11. Just an interesting thing. Got to put that up there. App performance though is largely the same. So once you're on and you're logged in, again, things tend to work pretty similar. Windows, I mean, as you go through the Windows 11 iterations, optimization is key. Can't highlight that enough, but things do get a bit slower. That's generally to do with all the nice fancy UI stuff they're sticking in your face. This looks a lot worse than it is, but this is CPU ready time impact, and this bottom one is 24H2 with 3 vCPUs on Nutanix. But you're jumping from 0.06 to 0.2%, and largely it's like, well, if CPU ready is under 3%, you're okay. But this for us would highlight something that maybe engineering could look at to improve, even though the margins are so small. Again, this is app performance during steady state, so as you're going up through the versions. Microsoft did a good job here of making things a little bit better, and then released this, which customers are going to see an impact. But again, the percentage numbers are quite high, but the actual real value behind that, so the time it takes is not, it's not like seconds difference, it's all in milliseconds. And then improving the product. So this is the feedback loop again, but this is from the other side. And this is real world scenarios. So a customer will generally come to us. It's either a customer or it's actually come from these kind of events where someone will come up after you've done something and say, hey, we really like what you do, but why are you not doing this? because everyone wants it and you're just not developing it. So can you get on with it and get it done? And then we'll go back to our managers and say, have you ever thought about this? And then generally the PMs will say, okay, what's the value that's going to give? So we can't just say, oh, it's a nice to have, there's got to be a reason behind it. We'll then have to write like the one-page document that we give to the PMs, they read it, give it a tick or a cross. Then they go to the engineering teams, they'll look at it, figure out how they can develop it, it will go into a beta release, and then it will get put into a release product. And this is one of the examples. So there was an optimized database solution that a lot of the NDB people were screaming about. I'm not going to claim to know anything about it because I don't. But there's a guy, Bruno. Yeah, I can give you his email address. He knows loads about this sort of thing. But this came from a customer. They wanted this. It went through him, went to engineering, and they developed it and put it out. Something that I do know a bit more about is VDI Sync. So there was a need for us to be able to replicate user profile data outside of the profile, user data outside of the user profile from one Nutanix file's location to another. And this is kind of like Cloud Cache, but involves more data. We were asked about it. We didn't have anything in the product, so most people were using something like Backup V2 or peer software to do this outside of Nutanix. So we said, listen, there's a real need for this in the community and our customers. Can we do something about it? The engineers were like, yep, you just tell us what you want and we'll write you some software to do it. It then went to beta 1 release, which was pretty good, did what it did, and then the version with files 5.1, which is now, is multi-prism central aware, so you can do it across regions. And you can do it on a share level. So it's actually a really good addition to any profile technology that you're running on top of Nutanix. And that's how it ends up in the product, from literally someone saying to us, can you write this for us? This is what I was talking earlier about, how we reduce sales friction. This is generally, like SEs will come to us and say, we've got a big deal, can you come in and do your thing and talk nerd to all these people so they know that like the products are doing what they say they can, which we do, and that's kind of strategic deals and expertise. Sizing's a big one. We often get asked how much kit you would need to run a certain environment, especially in the large enterprises. So if you've got an active deployment across 2 very big data centers with 10,000 people per side, there's a lot of moving parts that get involved in that, and we'll help with that so the SEs can quote and deliver on what we say. Support and education. We do help support. They come to us occasionally. The support teams at Nutanix are pretty damn good in my opinion, but we do get asked about EUC specific stuff every now and again. And the same with education. This is around the NPX certifications and bits and bobs like that. And then lastly, what else fills our time? Presenting, obviously. Marketing, we do have to help marketing, which is fun. It can be, so marketing like things a certain way, and us as EUC people like things a different way, and it can cause issues. Like we'll put something out and they might not like it that way, it might need a different font or whatever, but we do try and provide good collateral within the marketing department, and we'll try and assist them with giving relevant data out. Enablement and analysis, so we do look at competitive analysis surrounding our product stack. So we'll look at, I'm not going to name names, but the vendors that we support, and we'll compare. Although we can't produce data around it, we will look at how different offerings stack up on our software to be able to better advise customers on specific use cases. Community, we do a lot of stuff in the community. We run user groups, we present at places like this. Patents is quite a cool one. If we have ideas, there's a couple out at the minute, then we'll speak to the legal team, get a patent, and then the engineering teams will try and develop on our weird ideas that we come up with. We write loads of code, loads and loads of it. We're scripting things the whole time, and fun. it's a pretty cool place to work, to be honest. It's a good environment. You're not pigeonholed if you want to move around, or like if you want to do something with AI, they enable you to do that. If you want to become a database geek, then you can do that if you really want. And that's it. That's kind of a day in the life. Has anyone got any questions?
When do you sleep?
When?
There's a lot in there.
Yeah, it is, but it's, you know, it's the way we're run as a team is pretty flexible. So we'll be given. So my boss, for example, we have a meeting every month, or we speak all the time, but we'll have like an official meeting once a month. Every quarter we get given a bunch of stuff that we got to do. At the start of the year, we'll work out this is what we need to deliver over 12 months. This is what we're doing in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and it's like get on with it, get it done. There's, you know, if it takes you 3 hours, brilliant. You can go for a run. If it takes you 15, then you should have told him it was going to take you that. They're pretty flexible with how you work, which is quite nice. Enables you to do things like this. Anyone else?
Is it quota carrying, or are you under? Is there a quota element to it? Because kind of pre-sales as well, right?
No, we don't. So, no, the SEs will be pre-sales.
Okay.
So we only get asked. We do. I'm not saying we don't support that, but we will get asked on large strategic deals or big enterprise accounts to come in and assist the SEs. The SEs do. So they'll be like the sales guy in the SE, and they'll go in and do all of the selling into the customers. Most of the pre-sales work, to be honest, we don't get involved with. If there's an account that we have an existing relationship with, so for example, Bupa, I used to work for them. I had a customer call with them earlier. The SE will say, listen, Dave, can you jump on, because you know their environment. Or if we've helped with a sizing environment or a POC in an environment, then we understand it already, and it makes it a quicker conversation to have rather than having to go and do a load of discovery. If you walk in there already knowing what they've got, then it just makes it a smoother conversation. But we don't have quotas around. We get quotas around collateral that we have to produce. So we commit to a certain amount of like document refreshes, testing cycles, updates like Citrix will release LTSR versions. We commit to testing that and having knowledge internally about how that performs. But it's not like you have a certain amount of pre-sale stuff to do.
As what seems to be quite a small global team, do you have any pointers on how best to kind of collaborate across those diverse regions? Slack.
Yeah, Slack's pretty good. Generally, like, it kind of works for us. So, and that's because we're so far apart. It would be a bit more difficult. Like Kindo gets up as I'm kind of going to bed. So on Slack, it's an easy way to communicate because it's right here. He'll just send me a message. I'll be sitting there watching whatever on TV, or the wife will be watching. I'll be carrying on, and you can just get a message back straight away. It's quite like instant. Most mornings, we'll jump on a Zoom call just for half an hour, and it'll be like, this is what I've been doing during the day, and we'll be like, well, this is what we got planned. If there's any rollover, we'll, like for each bit of collateral that we're producing, we'll tend to set a canvas up. I don't know whether you ever use them in Slack, but they're pretty good for sharing. It's just like a shared Word document, but it's all in one place on your phone. And we'll say, listen, we did this is the problem we had today. And also not being too precious about getting a response immediately. It's quite important. Like if I'll write something and I won't be like sitting there looking, getting annoyed if no one's replied straight away. I'll put it out there and he might reply, you know, in the middle of the night, my time, but it will happen at some point. And it's just not getting a narc on if you don't get it straight back. That's me.
Thanks a lot, Dave.
Thank you very much.